Okay, so we are almost done. There is one more type of selectors that we haven't covered, and that is those two selectors that we find down here, and they are called pseudo selectors. Again, for the web people, this is all just much too familiar probably, but if you haven't touched this, this is also rather special. Now we will not look at this focus pseudo selector for now, because those elements that we are having here, they actually don't have a focus property, I think. So that's not super important. That's rather for things like text input elements. When you have several text input elements, like only one of them, for example, can have the focus. And I think we will touch this later in the course. For now, let's ignore this, because the general way this works is the same as with the hover pseudo selector. And what hover means is basically, is the mouse hovering over it? So that is a cool way how you can detect if a mouse is hovering over your element. And when it does, then you can apply some styling. Now let's see how that works. Let's close that. And let's, for example, take our center element. And now let's add the pseudo selector. Sorry. Hover, just like that. And now this time when you go over the element, nothing happens, because obviously we are not hovering over the element. So that's a little bit more difficult to actually see what's happening and to actually debug this. Now, in order for this to work, let's set some styling. Let's again say we want to give this some small border, 5 pixel. Some kind of color, just like that. And now obviously we can still not see anything, but now there is a little piece of magic that is actually quite beautiful in UI Toolkit, that they thought about this. You don't have to actually hook this up to a real game scene to test this. All that you have to do is to go on this preview mode here, on this preview button. When you see this orange frame, that means we are in preview mode. And now when we hover over the element, those pseudo selectors actually work. So you can see when we hover over the other elements, nothing happens because they don't have the pseudo selector. When we go over our center element, now the style is being applied. Okay, so let's get out of this preview mode again. And now we are really almost finished. Let's just, for the grand finale, let's see if we can do something that is similar to this rather complicated example here, because you can see that you can also use this pseudo selector kind of in a chained selector. So that way we could kind of, let's just see, when we use the pseudo selector on an outer element, and then say, for example, we want to, I don't know, we want to get direct children, and let's say only the labels. So what would we expect to happen here? Now, whenever we hover over the central box, then only its label children should get this border. So let's see if that works. Go into preview mode. We hover over this box, nothing happens. And when we hover over the central box, you can see our label element gets this style applied. And well, yeah, that's actually quite nice. And you can see that's exactly what is kind of described here under this example as a little bit of a more complicated example, to give you some inspiration what you can actually do with those things. And I hope that you agree a little bit with me right now that you have some sort of superpowers, and that actually in this little style sheet, in this little tiny style sheet window here, you can do quite a lot of stuff. And obviously you can do the same stuff also with scripts later, with C# scripts, and set those things kind of dynamically. But the logic and the stuff that is actually happening is exactly the same things that we did here. And it's always a good thing to actually try that out in the UI builder. That way you can debug almost everything here, up to using those pseudo elements in preview mode. So that is actually quite a nice thing. So I think we are done with those selectors. Now it's really rather important and handy if you really want to do bigger UIs and bigger designs to have this figured out, to understand the difference between your direct child selector, between your child at any depth selector. This will pop up over and over again, and it can make your life rather easy if you understand them, or it can be a real pain if you have hundreds of elements on your UI and you don't really have an idea what you are doing and you're changing different things in your UI. Styles pop up somewhere where you didn't expect it to, just because you don't really understand what those how those selectors are chained together. So again, play around with that. Obviously, you need to get some practice to really breathe this in. But we covered all of those different selector types here: types, classes, types IDs, and classes. The wildcard selector is actually not on this cheat sheet, but we also covered it. We covered the difference between a direct child operator and a child at any depth operator. I think the better name would be just descendant. That makes much more sense here. And we saw that we can also use hover elements that we can actually even preview with the preview button. And so when we go back to our overview slide here on our workflow, I hope that you are starting to see some kind of workflow for this part basically that we covered. Now, how are you utilizing UXML files? Why are they useful? How are we utilizing style sheets? Why are they useful? And that is basically your workflow in UI Builder. Now, obviously there are tons of hours that, tons of additional hours that you can spend on working on the actual controls, the actual elements, see what they actually can do. And we will do a lot of this in the upcoming lessons. But kind of as a general overview, what the function of those two file types are, I think we have a good basis now to move on to the other components basically. And so we are now just going to briefly take a look at this functionality part. Kind of how do you set some functionality on your elements, just with a minimal brief example. We will then also look at a very quick way how you can set this actually up and how you can get a running scene, a running UI in your Unity editor. And then the rest of the course will basically be diving deeper in kind of real use cases for real elements, and bringing it basically all together, but rather from a use case perspective of different kind of growing complexity things that you might need in your UI work. So I hope you liked that so far, and see you in the next chapter.